Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Founder Files. Today, I've got an interesting episode for you because for the first time, I'm interviewing 4 founders at once on the podcast. And it is my joy to share this experience with you with the people that pioneered earned wage access in South Africa. And this is the founders of paymenow. Now, what we get into in this podcast is first and foremost how it is that they obviously started their business. We get into the story there, where they got the concept from. Interestingly enough, something that's a very unique problem towards developing countries the idea didn't come from a developing country. We speak to the benefits of having a really solid 4-person founding team that can kind of do everything across the business and how that's actually allowed them to be super lean and scalable throughout the business's life cycle. We get into how they chose the investor that they have on board and why they went through a private equity approach instead of VC, even when they were at an MVP stage, and how they were able to secure that deal. What were the conditions of securing that detail and the financing, what milestones they had to hit, but also how those milestones and just the choice of that investor allowed them to be such a lean and scalable business from the get-go, and how they achieved break-even and profitability in a really early stage. We spend quite a bit of time getting into the technicalities and the product of the business and how complex this is across the regulatory environment. We're talking about payroll, obviously HR, we're talking about finance and banks, we're talking about operations, but now it's also multiple geographies and legislative requirements. So it's quite a complex business that they've really been able to simplify, and how they simplified this, we get into the details of. And then obviously the geographical expansion points. I mean, there's a lot of school fees that they've learned, a lot of things that mistakes they've made along the journey, but the learnings that they had from that, whether it's trying to expand into Lesotho, into the public sector, going into Zambia, but how those learnings have been able to really unlock their ability to formulate a scalable model about their geographic expansion, which I will let them explain how they do it. Now, this podcast is filled with absolute nuggets of wisdom on anything from how to simplify a product that deals with a lot of complexity in multiple environments, how to scale and grow your business geographically, how to approach your customer and user experience when dealing with multiple countries, languages, and cultures, and really how to go about being a super lean, solid operation that's really focused and building for profitability from the get-go. Now, if you're not following the Founder Files, then I suggest that you follow us now, because if you're wanting to get these insights and from so many other entrepreneurs, we've done over 100 episodes, make sure that you're following us now. It is the best way for you to make sure that you don't miss any of these amazing stories and these learnings that all these founders have been through, so you can avoid years of trial and error in trying to scale your own business. And by following us and making sure you're also liking, commenting, subscribing, it's also the best way to support this podcast and the best way to make me happy as the host. So thank you very much in advance. And without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, that's enough of me for now. Let's get into hearing the stories from the founders of paymenow. Welcome to the Founder Files, the podcast that's like eavesdropping on a conversation with a successful entrepreneur over a fireside chat. Join me, Cameron Coots, through this unique experience of unfiltered stories and insights from scaling founders around the globe as they share their ups, downs, and everything in between. Gentlemen, the founders of paymenow. This is the first time I've had this many people in one podcast interview, so this is going to be a really fun experience for us all. But guys, I've been wanting to have you on the podcast for a while now. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Can't wait to talk about what you've built, what you're still building, and the vision that you have for your business moving forward. But yeah, welcome to the show. It's great to have you.
Thanks, Cam.
Thanks, Cam.
So guys, same question that I ask everyone, kicking it straight off. Before we get into scaling, just want to understand a bit about your business, right? So just do you mind explaining what paymenow is as a business and how the business model works?
Yeah, guys. So Cam, paymenow, we're a fintech, so financial tech business. Very much like the name implies, paymenow. People are able to get a hold of their salary now. So effectively, instead of waiting till month end when most people get paid, if you've worked up until the 10th day of the month, why should you not be able to get access to some of that money that you've already earned? And if you look at just the context of the markets that we operate in, there's huge levels of financial exclusion, huge levels of financial illiteracy. So when people do need access to money throughout the month, their options are often quite limited, and those that they have are often very predatory. So fintech plays a role in that. What we do as paymenow, we integrate to an employer's payroll system, and effectively we're a business enabler to allow their staff to get access to some of that salary as they earn it. So if you had to ask a big company like a big retailer, hey, why don't you let your staff decide when they'd like to get paid? Some daily, some weekly, some monthly. That payroll person would end up looking like me. They'd pull all their hair out. But if you could throw technology at the problem, and that's what we're really good at, we've integrated into payroll. And the employer is our client. So they're totally in control of configurations, who gets access to what. And normally what they do is they give their staff access to about 20% of what they've already earned throughout the month. So it's not a loan. It's giving people access to a portion of the funds that they've theoretically already earned. And that, in a nutshell, is what paymenow is. There's a lot more what we do, but if you really want to break it down to the nuts and bolts, we're an alternative to lending. We are a fintech. We are an enabler to payroll. And at the end of the day, the employee is the one that benefits because throughout the month, they might not have access to cash in an emergency. And by using a service like ours, they get access to money that they've already earned. And we are, I would say, more than 10 times cheaper than traditional credits within the markets that we operate.
Yeah, so thanks for kicking us off with that. And exactly what you're getting into is part of what I'm super curious around understanding really the value proposition of paymenow. One thing that really caught my eye is that you are free to use for employers. So part of your model, I'm guessing, will be the fee structure in terms of the earned wage access itself. And naturally, with what this is, being your client, being the business, being a B2B2C play, you've already solved, even in the name of the business, really what the solution is for the end user and for the employee. So what's, besides obviously the free access for employer, what's the value prop to them? Because it's very clear why employees need this, but why do businesses need this?
Yeah, so there's definitely a few reasons why an employer would look to implement a solution like paymenow. So there's purely from let's say, operational efficiency perspective for the employer. Most companies in South Africa get bombarded with requests for salary advances throughout the month or for loans. And one, there's regulatory implications on that. But two, there's massive administrative burden. If you suddenly, again, a company with 20,000 employees, if that payroll or HR team have to engage with the workforce that's constantly coming to them, knocking on the door saying, I need $500, I need 200 Rand, I need to get to, that's why I was late for work this morning. I didn't have money for a taxi. So if we can firstly take that administrative burden and potentially regulatory implications and automate that for the employer, they love it. So there's that immediate efficiency in terms of, hey, my staff now don't have an excuse to say, I didn't have money for transport to get to the office. So that's the one really tangible impact that you'd have. From a more social impact perspective, and as you said, it makes sense. I mean, the underlying employee benefits massively. But companies, and I mean, this is not just a new trend. ESG is a massive thing that companies focus on in this day and age. And a solution like paymenow, which is an inclusive fintech, ticks very much that S around social in terms of that ESG. So it's and when you look at the payroll teams and you look at the HR teams, the remuneration and benefits teams, they don't often get all that much budget to implement cool employee benefits within their company. So if you bring a product that's solving a headache, it's ticking ESG, and it's actually free for the employer, no cash flow implication. We've proven that it is very simple to implement. You're checking all those boxes. And then over the last 4 years, we've also, with a proven track record, shown that we're making a massive impact and that what we say we do, we actually go and execute. It starts making that sales cycle a little bit shorter.
Yeah, maybe just to follow up on that. Sorry, Cam, I think maybe just to follow up on what Dion was saying. So I think for the employer, a lot of the time that manual effort of processing any optionality for an employer to get access to money, whether it be an advance, whether it be a loan, is this very emotionally subjective one, right? That is rested on the shoulders or on the pressure of an individual making a decision based potentially on certain company policies or business rules. So if it's for a funeral, or if it's for that, or if it's these very finite set of regulations that rest with an emotional subjectivity in terms of the person deciding on who gets. And I think with a financial technology platform like paymenow, not only do you remove that emotional subjectivity, but you automate a manual, cumbersome process that unfortunately requires a lot of human resource effort. And the last thing, as a solution, you want to go burden an employer with is the need to try burden a very overburdened payroll HR functionality even further. And I think the automation thereof, and I think the importance of making the tech so slick from an automation perspective becomes incredibly important. And I mean, from a paymenow perspective, yes, the employee is the benefit, but creating efficiency, to Dion's point, around automated process, removing the emotional subjectivity thereof while really greatly benefiting both the organization. We've also not out of pocket having to disperse those funds, which, as a paymenow, it's a cost that we bear. So you're removing another layer of complexity that employers absolutely love.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But I think the nature of complexity is that it's always going to exist. And for me, it either is going to sit on the side of your client or it's going to sit on you, which just goes to show that there's a lot of effort and admin that you've already taken off of your clients, but you've had to build into your product and technology. I deliberately bring that up because I want to put a pin in that. I'm going to come back to that point just now. Just give me a sense of the scale that you're at now. Because I mean, I think what you're solving is a very uniquely African problem, but you're not just in Africa anymore, right? Give me a sense of what the scale of paymenow is right now.
Yeah, so Cam, and I think I mentioned to you earlier when we met for the first time, we officially went live in March 2020 in South Africa, obviously just as COVID hit. I know for a fact that month was our first month of transacting. We did a total of 61 transactions for the month of March 2020, just to give you an idea. And then last month, which was November 2024, we processed over 700,000 transactions in that month.
Sure.
So just to give you an idea around scale,
guys.
and that's just in the SA context. So couple of things obviously built up to why we were able to reach that level of success, but just to give you that level of scale. And then in terms of geographies, started in SA. The next step was Namibia. It was quite a natural progression because at the time that we moved to Namibia, we were still part of the common monetary area. So it was quite easy to, scale a payments product across the border within the CMA. That has subsequently changed, and that's a whole nother conversation that we can have. So Namibia was quite natural based on that, as well as many of our clients are both in SA and Namibia, which then led to Zambia, subsequently led to Uganda, and most recently we launched in Pakistan, which is, to your point, it's off the continent, only 3 hours ahead of us, so relatively still manageable in terms of product support, but a very, very exciting new geographic region that we're busy, entering into. So 5 countries for now. We're definitely not going to stop there. But I mean, like I said earlier, I also had a bit more hair when we started 4 years ago. So probably a direct correlation to number of countries.
And we've gone live and switched off already. Sorry, Cameron. We've gone live and switched off already in Lesotho and Eswatini, Dion. So effectively 7. And again, operationally, Cam, we can chat about that later, how the complexity around geographic expansion, which, you learn on the fly and you adapt accordingly. And I think the effort technologically that we went through to try and make Lesotho and Eswatini work, but as a business making the decision to then shut that down within the space of a year, just purely because of the non-functionality thereof becomes critically important in the growth of any business. The ability to know when to say no or get out.
I mean, guys, the fact that you've gone from 61 transactions to 700,000 in 4 years, the fact that you're in 5 different countries, you're on 2 different continents. So I'm just imagining, even just from a legal and regulatory framework perspective, how complex that is. From a technology perspective, the fact that you built this into payroll, there's so much in such a short amount of time, what you've been able to build. So that I think this is going to be a fantastic conversation. But my promise is always, let's keep the narrative to understand the context. And then we're going to get deeper into this stuff as well. But talk to me about the founding story, guys. I mean, tell me why this business started in the first place. I mean, you were the first earned wage access company in South Africa, if not Africa, from my understanding. So where did the concept come from? How did you start this business, and why the 4 of you?
Okay, so how we pulled this idea together, which then subsequently formed into an incredible business. So earned wage access, what paymenow is not something that any of us invented. So we did come across the concept early in 2019. It's been a model that was very successfully rolled out in the US. And even in the US, it's hard to tell who came first. There's a bunch of companies that say they were the first, but circa 2013, 2014, a couple of guys started with this in the US. It then started in the UK in around 2018. And that is where it's just something that we came across. We noticed, on social media that this is a concept, earned wage access, something that's really, really making the rounds in those developed markets. And myself, Jerry and Willem, we worked together in a previous fintech business, really also B2B, building platforms, helping companies process debit orders. So that's the opposite of paying people money. We were taking their money, but on behalf of other companies. So we're a bunch of fintech guys, really good at building platforms. We're good at selling products to corporates, which is, of course, the nature of paymenow. It's a B2B2C. And then I was very fortunate to have gone to university in 2001. And the more famous guy on the call, Brian, was my varsity roommate. And sure, great rugby player, but studied computer science. And I knew that if there's one day an opportunity to work with my old roomie, it'd be incredible. And if it's something to do with fintech and comp sci, that would be even better. So I'd like to say a little bit of a perfect storm. 2019, saw the concept. Myself, Jerry and Willem, had a lot of fintech, come from banking backgrounds, come from building B2B platforms. Brian had just retired. So it was this thing of the perfect storm, all of us together, a cool idea. And we were able to then take that idea, formulate a business plan, put something together, build an MVP. Brian got very upset when we told him we got our MVP. And Brian's like, yeah, he's the MVP, the most valuable player. We said, no, Brian, minimum viable product. We were then able to take that to an awesome investor, which you mentioned earlier on. We will talk a little bit more about where we went with the plan to then, get some funding and turn this thing into a fully fledged business. But yeah, that's the journey. 2019, a cool idea, a bunch of guys that I believe we'd done the hard yards over the last 20 years of working in banking, working in tech, right place, right time, and then mixed COVID into that as well. I think that actually helped accelerate our business. And yeah, it turned us into what we are today.
And to follow up, so Dion did approach me. I was initially very skeptical about the concept. I was though fortunate to be going to London, and Dion's like, "Oh, he's also going to be in London at that time. Let's go visit two of the market leaders in earned wage access in the UK." And Dion, was maybe in a bit of a back against the wall type situation from his previous fintech environment, so he was just looking for a different thing. I was very much not, and thought, this guy was the MC at my wedding, so I'll give him a bit of floor to move around with, and met these people with the initial consideration of trying to go to market as quickly as possible in South Africa, whitelisting an already established technological platform, but really trying to advocate it towards a South African market context. And I think in that formulation of a strategy, of a business plan, and what we were finding out, Dion, Willem, and Jerry, because of their experience in the financial services and fintech environment, really knew that we could actually be able to do this internally ourselves. And I think therein also lies a lot of power of how paymenow has been able to scale over the last 5 years, because we didn't just want to lend someone else's product. We didn't want to buy white label things off a shelf. And in being able to start everything internally with the vision of building it adequately enough for scale, particularly for corporate South Africa, I definitely think, in my opinion, set us apart from the competition. And why I say Dion needed to tell a story is because his home address was actually the initial address of paymenow. Because he'd actually gone and put all that effort into place, way before myself, Jerry, and Willem actually came on board. And I think and it's great having the four of us on this call, but I think to have that vision that Dion had and the strategic understanding of, yes, he's in a tough situation, he's come across this concept, but how do we capitalize and make it successful? And I think myself, Jerry, and Willem, I'm obviously very fortunate that we were approached, that yes, we did have the specific efficiencies or skill sets needed to formulate a founding group, but that, through Dion's vision, we were able to build a foundation of which we could springboard.
Awesome, guys. Love to hear the story of how you really joined forces, but also how you met. I think that's really cool how it comes all the way back to university days. And yeah, meeting your co-founder then is an epic way to really join the dots looking backwards. So cool, guys. I know a fair amount around business strategy and organizational psychology, but I know pretty much nothing around technology and product, right? And I'm like, even from where I'm sitting, just the complexity of what the nature of this is, specifically integrating into payroll, which is quite a complicated function as it is, because it might be as straightforward as, look, managing salaries and wages, but it's like, what happens when someone what happens where benefits plug in? What happens when someone leaves halfway through the month? How does this affect it? There's a lot of moving pieces just on the HR side of things that I'm trying to wrap my head around. But then on the technology side of things, you're also having to move money, right? Which is an extremely sensitive and vulnerable space that needs a lot of security. You need to do this quickly. You need to remove complexity for the clients at the end of the day. Just talk to me just around this MVP journey, around you have this concept, which by the way, I'm also fascinated that this started in more developed economies, because this is such a it's such a clear solution for developing economies. But yeah, let me unpack that MVP for me. Talk to me about the products. What were some of the challenges that you had to overcome to really build this scalable product?
So I think from my perspective, at least, we had all of, well, Dion, myself, and Jerry had some banking experience. So we basically knew from the inside out how that infrastructure worked. So if we want to start there with the moving money portion of it, we knew how the integration works. We also knew the people within the bank. So that was really a benefit to us, to be able to work with a team that we know on the other side as well. So basically leveraging skills that we already had, and some of the solution pieces that we knew how it fit together in the bigger payments landscape, at least. So the moving money portion of it was probably easy. I think the where a lot of the investigation and work went in is on the payroll side, and then of course solving between the payroll side, like you mentioned, people leave, they abscond, there's hourly workers. How do we solve for that? Solving all those problems within the model and paymenow, and I think that's really where the solutioning portion is. How do you solve for these scenarios where you can't always have a real-time feed of updating information, if someone leaves or if they abscond or whether they decide to resign, salary changes, bonuses, all those things. And I think those are all things that we solved through the financial model and the access model in paymenow, by mainly by just giving a percentage of already earned wages. The model in itself, they builds in a little bit of fat, where you don't need the real-time information up to an hourly or whatever basis. And we only give access to wages that you've already earned, which basically means everything up until yesterday. So whatever action is today, it's fine, or occurs today, it's fine if we only know about that tomorrow. Because if it changes, the situation changes around your employment, it's fine that it's a day late. So between the model and the tech, we basically solved all those issues. And of course, we've got a great team monitoring this thing 24/7, which helps as well. I think we're a difficult banking client, because if any bank somewhere in the country has a hiccup or a niggle in the infrastructure, we know about it at this stage, because we submit payments 24/7, basically a payment every minute, at least one. So yeah, it's just a great team coming together, and then solving it with the right business model in the end. And we solution each client separately. So every client implementation is a little bit different, whether it's cycle or model or integration. And of course, there's specifics to each client, how they handle their business and map it. And we've built this framework that can solve for all of that, or for most of it. We're still expanding it, of course.
If I can just talk about the technology. So It's a fintech. It's plays within HR and payroll. So we're moving a lot of money around real time, which is scary. And Willem was touching around that. This is 24 hours a day. And the interesting thing about the earned wage access model, and specifically the paymenow model, Cameron, if you log in today, your available balance is say 100 Rand. But then at midnight tonight, our model actually kicks over. So at 1 minute past midnight, your available balance might be 200 Rand. So we have a lot of people transacting between sort of midnight and 1, 2 in the morning. They almost just wait for that extra bit of cash to accrue into their available balance. So we've got instant payments flowing in the thousands and thousands right through the day. And we have to provide support for that, which is quite tough because we're dealing with customers that have never had access to this kind of a service, suddenly getting access to something that's absolutely real time. So that's quite critical and in itself risky. On the other side, we're dealing with massive large corporates, and payroll data is something that's extremely sensitive. So we need to be able to build trust with that corporate to say, you are going to be sharing, obviously if the employee consents to it, some very sensitive data. And we know data and hacking and phishing and all these scams that go on at the moment is massively critical, and it's top of everyone's minds. So we have to really build something that gives the employer that level of security and safety that we're going to look after their data in the right fashion. And that's a massive differentiator for us, we think, in the market. And then secondly, marrying that to something that's a real-time 24/7 payments infrastructure, and that's our cash. So when that employee on the middle of the month requests 1,000 Rand and it's 2:00 in the morning, we need to make sure that that person gets that 1,000 Rand within a minute, and that it's fully reconciled, and that it's fully supported, and that all the data remains safe. So it's a challenge. To Willem's point as well, every employer is an integration. So that's really where the complexity lies. But I think we've really solved it in the last 4 years, that we've built this very standard integration layer that can handle all these nuances. And if you had to ask me the one big, where really the value of earned wage access lies, it's in that extraction layer within all our corporate clients, because suddenly we now have access to that data. We trusted with it, but we can then utilize it, and at the end of the day, the underlying employee benefits.
So, guys, I feel like complexity is going to be just like a word for the podcast here. But like, if we're looking across disciplines, like now that I'm learning more about this, we've obviously got payroll and HR on the one side. Talking about recon, we've got accounting models that are just running in the background as well. We've got technology, but then we've also got legal and regulatory frameworks, and then ethics, right? In terms of how all of this is handled and what you mentioned. So I think the way that you explain the product is quite simple in terms of because of the value for it, but building it to that point is going to be really complicated. You also spoke to the point there is like, it's your money and your cash. So I just want to understand the flow of money and payments here, because I was trying to understand, do you have to go integrate into different banks? And then those are own complexities. You mentioned the onboarding integration to someone's own payroll, but then the connection between there and then the employee's bank account. So help me understand that. Where does the source of the money come from for that earned wage access? Is that coming from you guys? Is it coming from like the employer's bank? Talk to me just around how the money really flows and who the responsibility sits on there.
Okay, Cam. So the traditional model, and I say that because there's nuances in how we roll this thing and skin it in the various jurisdictions that we operate in. But standard South African model for paymenow is we sign up a large employer. That employer sets up the rules and parameters. They load their employee data, which inevitably means those people are now eligible to access paymenow. Come the 10th day of the month, Cameron logs into his app. He sees his available balance is 1,000 Rand. He decides to take out 500 of the 1,000, for example. paymenow will, out of our own funding that we've raised, go and put 500 Rand in Cameron's bank account on the 10th of the month. And at the end of the month, we will send a file or integrate into payroll at Cameron's employer to say, Cameron had taken out the 500 Rand. Please deduct 510 Rand from Cameron's bank account salary. Okay. So 510 comes off your salary, and that employer pays the 510 into paymenow's bank account. So that's effectively the flow of cash. Now, what happens in the back of that, paymenow has an acquiring bank that we integrate into where our funding pool of funds sits. And that then gives us access via banking infrastructure to make a payment to wherever Cameron banks. So you could be banking with Capitec, and we could be banking with FNB, for example, but you execute the instruction on the paymenow app. paymenow puts the money into your bank account, but your employer takes it off your salary and settles us at the end of the month. And that's effectively the flow of funds.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and it cuts out a lot of moving pieces. But obviously, it's something like that for a startup is not necessarily easy to achieve. So I think this is a perfect segue in terms of talking to me. Talk to me about your first capital raise. Talk to me about your first investor and how you were able to really finance this. Because this is not just simply around product development and go-to-market strategy. Is you also need inventory, if you will, to be able to sell what it is that you do.
Again, very much a story for Dion to tell, Cameron. I've been a year retired, and Dion had sort of approached the three of us and was talking about this. And he said, listen, he's got this mate who's got a brother that he believes we can approach. The brother's very well off, but also extremely strategic in his ability to be connected within C-suite level South Africa. So I was like, I'm a rugby player. I've got a bit of rands in my bank, but I'm definitely not the one to invest. So we drew up a spreadsheet, which myself, Dion, and Willem took to Garth. Met him at actually at Ideas Patel in Cape Town. I think it was November 2019. And again, I'd never really pitched a product before. I was a sort of this newly retired former athlete. Dion and Willem had been in financial services before, so it was really interesting. But we got to chat to Garth, and Dion had obviously known him through various ways of interaction on a personal level, not really having ever done any business things. And Garth actually had our current CEO from a Digico perspective with him in the room, who he sort of wanted to palm paymenow off to. So he gave us the opportunity. I'll never forget, like, Garth was extremely strategic in that pitch, like just talking through the numbers or whatever. And having never been to a pitch, I was very blown away by all the work and effort Dion, Willem, and Jerry had put in crunching the numbers and forecasting certain financial models. And Garth looked at the three of us and said, "You guys know that spreadsheets never lie, right? Are you willing to take a bet that this is what you're going to achieve?" And I'm like looking at Dion, I'm like, "Yo, dear, I'm not a big betting man. I'm not quite sure how. I trust you as a friend, but I don't know how much I'm willing to bet on that." And Garth sort of like really looked into the finer details. You could see he was interested, but it didn't actually seem when we left that meeting that he'd bitten. And again, myself and Dion did further work. So to Dion's point, initially it was understanding, yes, we were building something for scale. We weren't looking for pure capital. And I think that's, again, been a massive differentiator in how we've been able to scale so successfully. So Dion knew Garth was involved in a greater group called the DNI group. And because of that, the strategic element of why we'd approach Garth was much more important than going to any accelerator or possible incubation hub or VC type strategy, because we really knew that to get a corporate on board, corporate South Africa is very network from a C-suite level executive. And if you don't have that positioning to be able to sell, selling is going to become extremely difficult. And again, Dion, being the strategist he is in understanding what is needed, to brought Garth to the table. We had a few more further discussions. We had to fund it initially ourselves. So, Dion, had been unemployed for a few months. Willem and Jerry had to make a big decision to leave the fintech company. I was doing a few rugby ambassadorial elements on the side, which was able to do it. But we initially had to fund, I think we went like 3 or 4 months without salary. And Dion had a great book called Slicing Pie that was really strategic in the formulation of a share structure within the company. I'd, again, never started a company before. I'd always bought in at a certain thing, but I never really understood how you set up the sort of shareholding structure if you're willing to want a strategic investor involved. So for me, it was a fascinating journey, Cameron. I was learning so much quicker than what I'd ever run on a rugby field. But the comfort of knowing that the three guys on the call with me, had been in that financial services, in that fintech environment, that we were able to build tech in-house, not needing to go outside, reducing costs already. Jerry had almost as much hair as yourself, Cameron. So, he also started, losing hair, building an MVP. That was really cool. But it was the strategic understanding of the investor that we were looking for. We weren't just wanting to sell a story. We were wanting to build a business, and building the business on the correct foundations of, yes, you need money, but you need the more strategic element of being able to sell, which became critically important in the success that we've been able to achieve as a business.
I think it was perfect storm, right? Dion came out or brought this idea to us and brought the four of us together initially. Dion's on the business side and sales side, knew how to put that together. Jerry knew how to build a awesome user experience, because that was really important to us, and it still is. We pride ourselves on that, the user experience, as well as the level of service that we give to the end users that we've got. They typically don't get that level of service. Brian was there to help us get this thing out there and sell it, and build the business. I knew how to do a little bit of integration and build a framework to run this thing on. And then strategically, our investors were awesome to us, not only from a funding perspective, but really from a network perspective as well. And they still are, to get this thing out there and sell it, and make it work.
No, it's on the app itself, interesting story, but I mean, it's a little bit cliche, but it's the truth. Dion actually drew what the app must look like and work on a serviette. I'll give a couple of $1,000 for that serviette, just to frame it somewhere. But yeah, it came off ideas that Dion had. He drew it on a serviette, and we started hacking away on a solution. I think the reason why I wasn't at that call with Garth is because I was making sure the app's not going to break while you're demoing.
So I can share with you a really cool story how our investor kept us very honest and very lean early on. So myself and the team, we pitched to Garth. Garth liked the idea. I think we really packaged this thing well. We really sold a good story. Opportunity was quite clear. And Garth said to us, what, guys, I'll invest in you. But there are sort of 3 caveats or let's call it 3 hurdles or milestones that you have to reach in order for me to unlock the funding in your business. And this was super cool. I mean, there were quite a few guys that wanted to invest in us. Brian already explained why it was so important that we wanted to get Garth and the D&I group behind us. But I'll share with you, and I mean, I won't share the exact numbers, but Garth came up with these 3 really cool milestones. So he said, 1, I want to make sure that you guys can really build the tech that you say you can. So I'm going to, 1, have some CTOs from my other company have a look under the skirts as to how you built it. But I also want a third-party company do a pen test on your entire tech stack, and you need to pass that with flying colors. So that was 1 check that he said, which, a lot of guys, if you talk to VCs, I think the level of DD that VCs do these days is quite light. But when you start talking to people where it's their own money and it's a private equity company, you get that slightly different level of DD. So step 1 was, are these guys really walking the talk? Can they build tech? So we had to pass that milestone, which we did. The second one was, is this something that people would actually want? Is this a product market fit? And he actually gave us a metric that said, you will only unlock a next level of this initial funding if you reach R1 million within a month and 1,000 transactions. So we had to do that before we could unlock. And remember earlier I told you we only did 61 transactions in month 1. So step 1 was the tech, you need to walk the talk. And 2, prove that people will actually take this up. And not just the consumer, because that's, I think, quite obvious, but can you go and sell it to enough employers to make up those numbers? And then the third one, because this is at the end of the day a very cash intensive business, you need the money throughout the month to be able to churn through. I mean, last month we churned over 220 million Rand through the business, just in SA alone. So where does that money come from? So can you go and either raise it yourself? Can you, the four of us around the table, raise 200 million Rand? Probably not. But can we go get some level of institutional bank funding that we can actually prove that this model can scale? So the tech works, people will take it up, but let's say people start taking this up. Can paymenow go and stand on its own legs and raise cash at the rates needed to keep this business model in check that's 10 times cheaper than any form of credit in the market? And that's where we pitched ourselves. So he really came up with these three really, really important milestones that proves that tech works, proves that people will take it, and proves that it can scale. And we were able to check all three of those. Yes, maybe they helped us a little bit in getting that wholesale or bank funding behind the lines. But that was an incredible journey that we went on. So it kept us lean, kept us very focused on what was needed to build a business that's scalable.
Yeah, Dion, we actually got the funding sorted ourselves, I think. The rides weren't great, but the funding was there.
I think do what you got to do to get out the gates, right? And I what I'm immediately thinking about is like, that's a great summary in terms of how good is the product? So let's test that, right? How good is the market positioning, the value in your ability to sell this? And then thirdly is can you actually get the resources to be able to execute this at scale? And I think that's the kind of simple test for any real startup, really. And what this is making me, I'm making this up as I'm talking, but the benefit of going to private equity versus, let's say, angel, because this would have been an angel investment at the stage that you were, is that the onus on what you need to do upfront to secure that investment is way higher. And a lot of people aren't willing to do that in terms of startup founders, just because it's like, I'm just not ready for that. And also, I have no idea what I'm doing. I've just got this great idea, right? It could be a fantastic idea and people make huge amounts of money because of that. But the level of maturity you need to be as founders to be able to make it through a private equity due diligence is a lot more intense than in other spaces. But it's the reason why I say this is because there's an inevitability on your business journey when you're going to have to get your house in order. And it comes down to those core fundamentals around like how you're going to sell, how good the product is, and how you're going to resource this and make sure that that's lean at the same time. And the fact that you're able to do that upfront set up some solid foundations for the way that you're moving forward, versus a lot of people will just go through this massive cash burn in the early days trying to figure out all the above. But for you, those were the stakes to really get out the gates in the first place. And so I think that really, I love that because it really forced you to be a super lean, sustainable business model and business from the get-go.
Absolutely. You summed it up, perfectly. And Garth even said to us, we'll unlock some further funding once you break even. And, a lot of times that's also a double-edged sword, because you might then be sort of more focused on keeping lean than purely growth focused, because you want to keep lean to break even, but you also want to scale. And that also evolves. So as we went on this journey, God said to us, what, guys, forget about this break even thing. I can see you guys can break even. Now just focus on scale. And inevitably, we still broke even at record timing, but we also weren't that short-minded or narrow-minded to say, let's totally count the pennies. We were very careful with that. We didn't necessarily do that after we started gaining this critical mass. Because if you also start going, I'm just focused on break even, that could be very much counter growth, because you're then not willing to spend to scale. So it was a very fine balance very early on. It was COVID. It took time for that initial funding to actually hit our bank accounts. And we were super lucky. We met this incredible guy on our journey. And really, the success of paymenow has been meeting incredible people on this journey. And you only meet those people if you put yourself out there. I mean, Brian and I probably did at one stage in the height of COVID. We said to the world, we are essential workers because we're running a 24/7 payments business. We're allowed to be on the road. We're allowed to go to office. But Brian, I think you and I were doing 6 to 7 sales calls every single day. We were selling this product, talking to every possible business out there, speaking to, growing the network. And this incredible guy, and I'll say the name, Johan Bussini, he's just an incredible human being. We came across him. He also represents a big VC equity business. They don't really look at startups, but he said to us, you know what? I love what you do. I think you got an awesome already then little team together. I'm going to promote you into or sign you up for this accelerator called the Catalyst Fund. And that actually saw us through the first year in terms of our burn rate, because they gave us, I think it was like $100,000 of grant funding that we received, because they believe we're doing something really exceptional. And we got this cash during a very, very tough time while we were bootstrapping and waiting for Garth and the D&I group to check those boxes for us to finally, get some cash in to grow the business. So it's been just this thing of perfect storm, meeting the right people at the right time, definitely executing on what we said we were planning out to do, and then just having these things sort of fall into place. So I think one day we could probably map this thing out and write a book about it.
We definitely can write a book about it, D. I think the other thing, as much as it was a perfect storm, the whole saying of failing to prepare is preparing to fail. And one of the reasons we got the unencumbered grant funding from the Catalyst Fund, because Johan Bassini put us through, was because when Dion came across earned wage access and what it was doing in the developed market economies of the US and the UK, he looked at a specific South Africa focus and firstly knew it was probably going to be a tough sell because of the reputation that lending had in South Africa, because of the very predatory manner in which people, had been trapped into a very vicious debt cycle. So one of the key factors that in the initial co-founding of paymenow that Dion brought forward is that if we were going to do earned wage access in South Africa, we can't do earned wage access as what earned wage access is being done currently elsewhere. We need to put a very different, unique spin on it. And looking at the African context, looking at the developing marketing context, Dion said, we need to take earned wage access, the powerful tool that it is, and almost marry it with a financial wellness environment. And because of where we were at in present times, talking about things like reward and incentivization, gamification, and what has set us apart, from the outset is that we built earned wage access as the core of what we do, but we really integrated into a gamified financial wellness journey, which then also allowed us to separate ourselves from the rest of the market, allowed us to get people excited about, we talk about complexity, about potentially, putting out another fire in terms of financially educating people, giving people access to a credit score, letting people do a budget, complexities that employers struggled with, from a pure HR functionality perspective. And yes, everything was a perfect storm, but it was the key elements of how we looked at the South African market in context on its own, looked at how we can be different, and in so doing, allowed us to catapult even further than the other players that sort of started, end of Q1, beginning of Q2 2020.
So guys, it's obviously an amazing story of what you've done. And Brian, I love the sincere narrative. I think a lot of people, specifically when they're going to corporate in a B2B2C model, will often greenwash like their narrative to make it seem like there's impact. Well, this is like there's a genuine massive need for financial wellness in South Africa and across the continent. And the fact that you walk the talk, I mean, if you just look at the front page of your websites now, having those educational materials in there, I think is fantastic what you guys have been able to build. And what I'm just super fascinated by from a strategic perspective is what the future of that looks like, with the core functionality being earned wage access, but how you're able to create this platform for financial wellness and solve other problems moving forward as you've created this massive audience and level of users across the country. But this is not a podcast for ideation and innovation. Well, it's a podcast about innovation for sure, but not about ideation. So I want to go back, Dion, there's something that you said that I really want to double click on in terms of understanding the practicalities of. Right, so it's like essentially if you're looking at this like moving scale of break-even point, right? And so when you can strategically prioritize, are we going to be focusing on profitability, or are we going to be investing in growth? And it's a sliding scale that you can really move over time. Talk to me through the practical decision-making process. What were the things that you were like kind of competing in your attention and your decision-making around how is it that you should prioritize what you should do moving forward? And what really made that a challenging time of what path to go down?
So I think what really set us apart right early on was the fact that just the four of us on this call were able to build this business end to end and even sign up our first few clients and not need to do anything outsourced. We were able to build the tech ourselves, sell the product, And some of the initial support work was actually done by the four of us. We literally were answering phone calls. We had a WhatsApp interface where people could ask questions. So we broke this thing down from day one as an entire business model that just the four of us were able to figure out how this thing worked. And then we were able to adequately scale where we thought would be the next step needed. So we always take a bit of a view to say, we need to hire now for 6 months from now. So that was definitely something that we always, and still to this day, we always look at our current capacity within a certain department of the business. And we say we hire today for what we believe we'll need in 6 months. We've been pretty good at that. In terms of, at the end of the day, we also stick to our core. We know we're a fintech business and we're tech at the end of the day. So when it comes to sales, we don't necessarily have a sales team of 20 people. Instead, we rather look to see how we can leverage off of, obviously marketing, but sales channels. So partnerships with the right people within the right space or the right entities that can give us that reach to reach those B2Bs. So that's really important. So we will spend money on tech, we'll spend money on support, but when it comes to things that is outside of our wheelhouse, we like to see how much of that we can rather partner. So that also talks a little bit around how we were then able to scale to other jurisdictions. So we did a bit of learnings in some of the jurisdictions, but what we've been able to fine tune is find an in-country partner that has boots on the ground, that has credibility, that can comply with the in-country legals and regulations, and that can also be that network for you that our initial angel investor, private equity company, were able to bring in terms of sales and numbers. So in Pakistan, for example, we partnered with a company called Neem, and these guys are an embedded finance business. So there's already synergy. They can bring the payments infrastructure. They've got a lot of large corporate clients already on their books. They're also backed by some big private equity guys in Pakistan that can unlock the Bs that we need. So it really is stick to what your core competency is and see if you can then partner or sort of hand over those other functions to people that are just better at you in that function. So I'd like to think that that's where we were really able to gain scale, is that stick to your knitting. But if you're a fintech, I do believe that you need to be good at the fin and the tech. But when it comes to the distribution, especially B2B, how can you leverage off of the bigger networks that are already out there?
So I 100% believe in being lean as well. And I think where a lot of people can go wrong in terms of where they overinvest is the fact that it's not just around how they're spending their money. It's the fact that they start throwing people at the problem. So if they started suddenly having a certain issue in other parts of their business, the main thought is just, I'm scaling too quickly. I don't have time to think about this. Hire someone in to do it. And you just have this extremely bloated cost base. But then also you've created a lot more complexity in the internal environment of your business when you should be focusing on growth. And the way I like to think about that is through the lens of build, borrow, or buy. Right? Is this function, is this capability, is the skill set something that I can build within the business in terms of actually skill people up in order to be able to do? Is it something that I need to buy, I really need to acquire and then actually bake in here accordingly, or something can I borrow and outsource? And almost all back office functions within a small business can be borrowed for quite a long period of time. And so I love the intuitive nature around really applying that. But I think what's super unique about your story is just how you were able to borrow distribution capabilities, which is often something that's so critical from a tech perspective and something that you really want to have control over. But for you made the decision of actually, let's really stick to what we're best at and let go of a little bit of control and distribution for the sake of being a scalable, profitable business. So I really want to unpack the thinking process there. But I know that decision didn't come overnight, right? You paid some school fees in terms of a certain expansion to another African country. Talk to me about that experience. What went right? What went wrong? What did you learn?
Yeah, so we successfully scaled to Namibia, and Namibia was relatively, as I mentioned earlier, quite easy. 1-to-1 to the rand, still is, even though you just can't make the payment anymore from your South African bank to Bank Windhoek. You can't do that anymore. So that was a bit of a challenge, but we had an opportunity through one of our partners to offer the paymenow service to the entire Lesotho public sector, which in itself, it's not massive. It's about 50,000 employees, but that in itself is something that you could almost reach operational break even with 50,000 employees. And we looked at the opportunity. We got really excited, and we said, it was also common monetary zone at the time. It would be a quick scale. And it was only upon investigating the integrations into Lesotho public sector that we realized that this wasn't going to be as simple. Things that were told or promised upfront didn't materialize as we started looking at the tech infrastructure that was made available in Lesotho. So we rolled out, I think we started with a pilot group of about 2,000 people. It started getting some uptake, but then at the end of the month, when there was the inevitable deduction process that had to happen. So again, the business model, middle of the month, the person wants 500 rands or 500 lotis. We will give it to them. And then at month end, that needs to come off their salary. Upon going through a couple of these processes with the Lesotho public sector, we realized that if that employee owed some money to the post office of Lesotho, that gets sort of priority, and then everything else fails. And the recon was atrocious. So quite often you see an opportunity. It sounds almost too good to be true. It can in many instances be that, but in having these conversations, speaking through the network, our private equity company has about, I think it's 17 companies within the group that operate in 23 countries globally. So once you start tapping into that network, to your point, we've been able to borrow the distribution elements of scaling this business. So we make sure that we can build the tech. We are able to scale it to work in Uganda, scale it to work in Pakistan, which I can promise you is no easy feat, because you're not allowed to house data outside of the country. So we are, always cloud first. Everything we build must be, housed in one location, or at least ideally one stack. Obviously, you can replicate it globally, but we don't want to deviate and build various tech stacks and various iterations of the product. But through having these, plug into a network with these opportunities, we've had to make sure that we can bring the tech, and then on the other side, the distribution channel hopefully holds up their end of the bargain and helps us get scale on that side.
So if from my understanding, it wasn't just Lesotho, right? It was Zambia that you also paid some school fees in terms of learning this model from a distribution perspective, right? Where it's like you try to put some boots on the ground. You're like, okay, cool, let's actually go take this to market. So we know how to sell this, and you got burned. What happened?
I'm going to maybe just quickly cut to Zambia, because I think Dion knows that geographic expansion is a swear word in my books, because South Africa is our little baby. But I think through our acquiring bank and through what we sort of discovered in Namibia, we really believe that there was a massive opportunity using current employers in South Africa who had been on paymenow for a couple of months or a couple of years, to use that opportunity and replicate their sort of multi-territory environment where they are operational. And again, because of Dion and Willem's background within the financial services of this one particular acquiring bank who had operations in Zambia, we really believe that, we can use these multinational companies and just jump border. The regulatory framework can't be that difficult because we've already gone through all the hard yards in South Africa. And Dion sort of started having these discussions, and then he's like, no, I think we can do this. And he goes, okay, we only need a money lender's license. Okay, cool. And then Dion can take the story from here.
Yeah, thanks for that segue into that story, Brian. Zambia was actually our first official non-common monetary foray, if you want to call it that, where we actually stepped foot outside the country. So I think ignorance is bliss when you sort of still in the early phase and you think, we built this thing from scratch in South Africa. We can do it in Zambia. So we went and registered a legal entity there. I'm a director of a business in Zambia still to this day, even though we've actually moved the whole business model subsequent to that, and I'll color in between the lines a little bit more. But part of our business model, so in South Africa, we are not lending. There is a loan facility between us and the corporate clients, the B, but because every single one of our companies that are our clients in South Africa have a turnover of more than 1.5 million rand per annum. That falls outside the ambit of the National Credit Act. That is one of the sort of exclusion factors. However, in Zambia, irrespective of whether you're an individual or a legal entity, irrespective of your turnover, if a company gives a facility to another company, you need to be registered as a money lender. So we went through this process and we thought, oh, this can't be too difficult. Let's go and get a money lender's license. Which meant we had to go to the magistrate's court, and that was in itself quite an interesting experience. Upon getting our money lender's license, there was one small caveat, and it said, you now need to give evidence of the bank account that's going to be used to provide the funding. So we said, okay, this is pretty cool. We'll just ask our acquiring bank, like Brian said, to open this bank account. So we go there and we say to them, guys, we need a bank confirmation letter. And they said, all right, why do you want to open this bank account in Zambia? We said, no, because we're running paymenow and we need that for our money lender's license. So hang on. If you want to be an official money lender in Zambia, we cannot open the bank account without your money lender's license. And the money lender's license is saying they can't give us the license without the bank account. So we hit that classic example of a catch-22 deadlock. Which again, we had to sort of tap into our network and ask people really nicely to say, no, guys, these are a legitimate business. They're from SA. They've been, operating for 2.5 years. This is legit. So through the network, through the banks, we were able to get our bank account, which allowed us to get the money lender's license. And then we realized that, this is actually not our forte. We're a bunch of fintech guys. We are really good at building incredible platforms. We're good at integrating into banks. We're good at integrating into payroll, but we don't want to have to sit with the regulatory and legislative burdens of deploying and setting up shop in each and every country. And that's where we realized, let's rather partner. And subsequent to that, we found an incredible partner in Zambia. We found awesome partners in Pakistan, and that is now the model going forward. We bring the tech, and the in-country partner brings the distribution and the compliance.
Can you talk me through essentially the pros and cons of that decision? Obviously the alternative is now having direct control over your presence within another geography, and but now it's not. It's a fully licensing model. What are the pros and cons of each for you?
Sure. So definitely a pro of the licensing model is speed to market. I mean, you don't have to go and set up. You don't have to go and register an entity. You don't have to go and hire people. You outsource that. But I would say one of the cons that we've learned is you need to make sure that your license holder in country is truly incentivized to take this product and run with it in market, and will give it the best chance of success. And what I mean by that is, one of the partners that we initially engaged with, they themselves were actually a financial services company providing loans. So, and if you think about the earned wage access model and the paymenow model, we are actually here to disrupt the money lending space. We are here to be a far more responsible, affordable alternative. So if you're going to partner with a company that might see you as a direct competitor conflict, or that you'll be cannibalizing their business, you need to make sure that that partner sees the value in rolling out this product potentially side by side with a product that might cannibalize their own business. So that was something that we learned early on. We were potentially a little bit ignorant to think companies can ring fence a product and not see us as a competition. Also, what I've also found in these distribution models, or distribution channels, should I say, or channel partners, or partner sale, or channel partners, is that they're so obsessed with their day-to-day job, their existing clients, their existing products. If you are going to be just a licensed product that has potentially a rev share or a cost component, how do you get them incentivized to sell your product? And that's something that we've been working on. I think we can still improve it, but that was one of the big learnings for us, is your distribution partner must be incentivized, and they must not see you as conflicting to their existing business model.
Can you actually unpack that one level deeper and how you figured that out? Like, what have you learned in terms of really incentivizing them to sell this, besides really just like having insanely high commission structures? And also, yeah, I think the point of it's sitting so close to their own product range that it's not actually competing but complementary. I think that must have been a fascinating learning journey.
So one, we learned that potentially a company that provides loans is way too close and conflicting. So when we found our partners for Pakistan, we found an embedded finance company. They're actually a payments aggregator. So they've already got ins with corporates and they've got ins with the bank. They're already good at raising funding. So that was a very natural fit for us. So I think early on, when you identify a partner through the learnings that we went through in previous instances, is be very clear that if there is even a small level of competition, you're going to have a struggle to get the workforce within that partner to distribute your product because they're just not wired in that manner. I think if you still want to go ahead with a company that might be conflicting to your product, make sure that they're incentivized in the right manner. So I can't explain to you exactly what the commission structures are like, but it still needs to make business sense. But you can't just then go in and say, oh, this is going to be a 50-50 split, because if they would much rather sell their own product than make 50% of a shared product. You don't want to be that ugly stepchild product within the business.
And now, just strategically, how has this changed your thinking around your own growth and continued scalabilities? Because it's like the nature of this model means that you've got to be now like hyper niche. It's like your ability to now grow into a greater product range. It increases the likelihood of now competition with your own distribution partners. So, like, what's your thoughts now? Like, again, I don't want to jump too early into the future, but I have to understand now. It's like, what's the thinking around what you want to be as a business moving forward, and how you're going to keep scaling?
So really the focus for paymenow is turned into something that's financial wellness. So at the end of the day, we know that the betterment of the underlying employee is our main core focus. So what the paymenow product has sort of evolved into is 1 in 2 of all our transactions is actually not a cash advance or giving people access to money that they've already earned. So 1 in 2 of all our transactions are actually for airtime, it's for electricity, it's for grocery vouchers, it's for, believe it or not, Uber or Bolt vouchers. People are using our platform as a way to, instead of cashing out into their bank account, and that has fees, and then to go from there and to buy airtime somewhere else or to get into a taxi, there's ways to, I almost want to say, cut out the middleman. How can we take the time that the work that you've done, which has got a value, how do you translate that to a product? So really remove friction, making that direct translation of hours worked to actually something in your hand. How do we actually bypass that and remove cost? So 1 in 2 of all paymenow transactions are actually at zero cost, absolute zero fees. So middle of the month, if I want to top up my electricity with 50 Rand, I can go onto our app, I can get a full 50 Rands worth of electricity, and only 50 comes off my salary at the end of the month. So we would love to build paymenow into a business model where the future of this is there is no fee to the underlying consumer. And like I said, we've already gotten that right for 50% of all our transactions. So to truly bring that wellness component to the underlying consumer. That said, there are awesome new products that we can bolt onto the platform that we are looking to roll out now in 2025. I just can't mention those just yet, but sort of watch this space. And then the other side of the coin is, as we get deeper and deeper into the employer's infrastructure, how do we solve problems for the employer as well? So most of the guys within the earned wage access space is doing things like comms to your employees. We do it totally free of fees. Because we built an app and we're really good at tech and we build the tech ourselves, we're not outsourcing our app through a third party that has additional cost layers. So we're saying, we built the app, 80% of the employees at a company is already using it. We built it in a very efficient manner. Why don't we let the companies communicate with their staff totally free of fees? So we built that. How are we able to drive other rewards and incentives that employers want to provide their staff? How do we distribute that through paymenow? Because at the end of the day, what are we really good at? dispersing value, whether it's cash, whether it's a voucher, whether it's comms. That's really what we're good at. So as long as we are able to build a product that keeps the employer happy and solving a headache and providing benefits, and at the same time offering a service to the consumer that's ideally always going to be close to, if not zero fees, we think that we're checking a lot of boxes and we built a very sustainable business.
Yeah, and it's also scalable within your clients as well, because the point is like even going from small pilot use cases going into other environments. I mean, I think about TFG as an example because I used to work there. And if you look at their retail employees versus if their logistics capability, then going into manufacturing, you've got very different types of employee sectors in the rollout, and that's before even considering the rest of Africa, UK that they have and Australia that they have a presence in terms of what they can do there. But I also just really, really love the point that you've made there from a voucher perspective, because it's like you've gotten one level closer towards the client. Because it's I can imagine the majority of the time why earned wage access is something that I'm using and why I'd be willing to essentially pay a cost for this is actually because of meeting basic needs. And it just goes back to the sincerity of what you're mentioning around financial wellness, is because if we're going to be something oriented around financial wellness and facilitating you meeting your own basic needs, then we don't necessarily want to charge you for that, but we still obviously need to be able to make money. So going that one level closer, where instead of just being cash, is like, what are you actually doing to be able to meet that need that you have? How do we give you the ability to utilize your own salary and what you've earned in your own wage to access that need immediately at no cost to you? But then I'm assuming where you'll get paid is now from the vendors that will now sit essentially within this marketplace that you've created. And I think it's an amazing evolution that you're taking the business through there.
And Cameron, those vouchers that we rolled out on paymenow are only necessity products, but you don't have to take our word for it, because the employer that rolls out paymenow, they're in full control as to what vouchers their employees see. So we would never promote sports betting or spa gift vouchers or luxury goods vouchers, but if for some crazy reason, maybe Dion's not there anymore and Brian or Jerry, and the new product head rolls out luxury goods vouchers, it's still the employer's configuration that says we want our staff to get access to this or not. So we really have this double layer of keeping us totally accountable for the impact that we're trying to bring to the consumer. Firstly, paymenow is a company that takes that to heart. We only will roll out things that are what we believe necessity products. But the employer is also inevitably responsible as well. So you've got almost this dual layer before anything hits the underlying consumer, which is the employee. So they really are protected, and it makes sure that the best possible product at the best possible fees lands on the consumer's lap.
It's amazing, guys. I love this, and I love where this is headed just from a story perspective and what this can do for essentially. Yeah, financial inclusion and health globally, and I think that's amazing. Your scope for that is incredible. The only time I get nervous thinking about that now is what that opens up in terms of the ability for ideas and opportunities, and what can we build and do this now becomes a lot broader than what it can in other ways. And that's the other risk of scaling, is actually trying to maintain focus. But again, that's a topic maybe for another time. Okay, so back to this topic of complexity, right? And I want to be educated now from a technical and a product perspective, because not only have we spoken about integration into banks, integration into payroll, we're talking about employer processes at the same time. You're proud about the UX that you've been able to develop. Now there's other vendors and businesses that are plugging into this at the same time. There's very sensitive financial information, but there's essentially one platform that multiple stakeholders have got access to. So from a security perspective, there's just so many points to come in, right? I don't even know what question to ask. All I'm observing is the fact that sounds complicated as hell, right? So I think help me just really understand, what you've been able to do well. If there's someone else in the audience, right? Like, let me frame it this way: someone in the audience who is building software or building tech products, specifically in complex regulatory environments, right? Tell me more about your approach towards product development, your product strategy, and how it is that you handle that level of complexity with all of these stakeholders that you have.
Building an MVP, that means something. It means that don't build to accommodate everyone at the same time, or for your first app. I think we were very lucky having to get a client like Belwert, if I can say their name, with 100 employees, right? Because even with those 100 employees for the first 2 months, we learned so much about what we need to do with the app. We made so many changes, because of the available balance, people inquiring about that. What do we do to display it better for the user? How do we make them understand without calling us, and seeing visually how their amount accrues every day? So I think that helped us a lot with our MVP that we built. And then also going on to the second line, which is 500 employees, So we learned a lot there, and we could enhance what we had. I think if we landed a 20,000 odd employer first, it would have been chaos. It was a little bit of chaos anyway, but I mean, that would have we would have paid a lot of school fees.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, where to start? But from a technology perspective, we were again lucky, I think. Or not lucky, we had the experience that coming from big corporates as well. So we paid some school fees in previous lives as well. So coming from big corporates, and especially the banks, we at least had exposure to this complex compliance landscape as well, right? So that was always in the back of our minds. Coming from the banks, security is always top of mind as well. So it kind of becomes a way of work, or it had become a way of work for us, to keep those things in mind. So, and I think just the fact that we knew about these requirements, that's not just a business requirement, helped us a lot. So we kept all these things in mind while building this. We knew we were going to work with sensitive data, very sensitive data. I mean, it's bank account information and salaries and contact information. I don't think it gets a lot more personal from a compliance perspective than that.
Can you talk
And
me through the how? Like, how did you manage to protect that? Because it's not just the salary information. It's like there's the one side of the security of actually money flowing, but then it's the
yeah,
security of protecting personal information at the same time. Like how
100%.
does the security actually work there?
So we'll only share data where it's really necessary to share that. For instance, I need to share your bank account with the bank in order for them to perform the payment, right? I need to say, take 500 Rand from the paymenow bank account and put it into Cameron's account. That's the only information that we'll ever share with that particular third party. And the same for all the other third parties that we deal with. We only share data to actually execute the transaction. The rest of it is always kept secret between ourselves. Of course, we need that information to actually provide the service and perform the functions. And the only place or the only other party that we'll share it with is actually the employer. That's the custodian of that data and where we get the data, because we don't own that. Of course, there's some standard security practices and guidelines that industry standards that you follow from a security and compliance perspective to segregate the data sets as well as keep the data safe. And we do a lot of effort to go through the pen tests to keep the data safe and make sure that all our attack surfaces that's out there is safe and secure and that you can't get in there. We've had some attempts of people trying to breach our
I'd
infrastructure.
be surprised if you hadn't.
There's a lot of money and a lot of product and a lot of sensitive data that sits behind or in our infrastructure. That's the one portion of it.
So we mentioned from a security perspective now. Now talk to me from a scaling perspective. Like why would just, I think that's the simple question for me is, why from a technical perspective is this hard to scale?
Well, so that's actually the thing. I think from a technical perspective, it's not that hard to scale our own infrastructure. The cloud computing and the new way of doing things and spinning it up means we can scale our infrastructure to, to where we need to, and as the business grows. That's really actually helped us a lot. It means that we don't have to invest in putting down huge amounts of infrastructure from the start. We still scale up and down throughout a month, depending on need and the resources and capabilities that we need. So that really helps us a lot. Where the difficulty with scaling it comes into is actually in the expansion portion of it. But I think through the years we've and through our experiences, like when we talked about geographic expansion, the due diligence around what is actually in that new jurisdiction has become easier for us. We now know what to look for. There needs to be proper bank infrastructure. We need to be if we need to deploy in country and keep the data there, we of course need a service provider there where we can host the data. So that, and the rest of it is actually the business portion of it, to scale that, which Dion talked you through. So from a tech perspective, if there's proper banking infrastructure and we can get integration into the payroll systems, then we're sorted. Again, with cloud computing, we can basically take this anywhere. There are some countries like Pakistan where it's difficult. There isn't an AWS or a Microsoft Azure in Pakistan itself. So
Really?
there we make
I would have
use
assumed that
of,
there was.
I know there isn't. But there we make use of local cloud providers. But our tech is deployable and scalable to basically any infrastructure. Yeah, that makes it easier for us.
I think what I can add in terms of the tech side of scaling, apart from the infrastructure and the systems, is the people. I think one thing where what's differentiated us as well is myself, Harry, and Willem all come from tech backgrounds. So we're not just a bunch of business guys trying to bootstrap a fintech business and then trying to go and find the tech resources out there. So when we started hiring, so we didn't outsource, we started hiring tech resources. These guys could actually come and fall in line under a bunch of guys that know how to do this. You couldn't come in and sort of pull the wool over our eyes. You know, there was already clear leadership. The designs were already well documented. We had built our MVP, and I mean, it's gone through a few iterations since. But a lot of the stuff, that the foundation that we laid down right from the get-go is still in play. And we were able to then bring in tech resources. And actually, quite a large component of our tech resources are relatively junior because we've got this incredible leadership team within Harry and Willem, that are just, exceptional at what they do. And they set this incredible example. And, the business has been around for almost 5 years now. And sadly, our very first employee has resigned. But that's one employee within 5 years. And we're celebrating the fact that he's moving on. And it's leaving on great terms. No, I think we're both celebrating, not just not. But it's testament to how we built this business really early on. We had a couple of rules within the business, similar to what the All Blacks say is don't be a a-hole, so that's an unwritten rule within the business. We try to hire people with great attitudes. But I think it's that mentorship and leadership that within the company, these young tech guys could sort of really just slot in and gain massive experience and contribute massively to the business. And that in itself has kept our tech costs relatively in check. Because we've been able to do this ourselves, grow the team. I don't want to say organically, but grow it internally with this incredible leadership team. So from a tech perspective, yes, there's actual tech, but the guys, building the app and making sure that the lights stay on, and the fact that in 4.5, 5 years, we've grown from 4 to 52 employees with only one person ever resigning. Like I said, had we had this interview a month ago, I would have told you not a single person has ever resigned from paymenow.
100% retention rate.
But that's inevitable. So the fact that we're a tech business and not and only one person has sort of left our business in 5 years, I think that's phenomenal.
Yeah, I mean that's huge testimony to your culture and to you guys as a leadership team. So from a product perspective, I want to ask one more question. And that's more actually from the user experience side of things, because the nature of being in multiple geographies and now multiple continents is we don't only have different cultures, but we've got different languages. So how do you handle that? Is there like a translation functionality? Is everything kind of hosted in English? Like what are some of the unforeseens that you had to deal with in terms of having so many people from so many different cultural and language backgrounds that are on your user base?
Yeah, so basically, luckily, we've only had one region that we had to translate for, and that is for Pakistan, obviously. First two languages are Urdu and English. Luckily, we had to translate it to Roman Urdu, which reads from left to right, because the normal Urdu reads from right to left.
Yeah, that would have been an entire rebuild of your product, basically.
Thankfully, no. But yeah, the translation for the app took about a month and a half, because obviously we can't do it. We had to make use of the guys from Neem. But a great interacting with them, learning a lot of things, not Urdu, but in translating an app. And that opened up other doors for our app, where we can actually, we don't need to hard code it in the application. We swap out languages through an API on the app, which is really great. And same with our education modules, it's not hard coded in the application. It's fetched on a really small scale from the database into the app when the user wants to see it. So we've learned a lot from that. But yeah, it is challenging at first to make sure that you get the correct way in doing translating the app and making sure that you can actually switch it, because there are people in Pakistan that prefer English. As I said, it is, the first two languages is Urdu and English. But yeah, that is something that we can replicate now.
I want to add to that, and I think it might be a little bit of a bigger answer as well. The fact that we built everything, because it's always this buy, build, or borrow question, right, in a business. But the fact that we built our own core product is a hugely strategic advantage to our business. Because we can transform it and change it to whatever we want to, right? If we need to have another language on it, we'll change it so that it caters for that language. If we need to add new education modules in a new way or a new product, and branch out to other things, we have the ability to do that in-house. And we've got the team. And I think one of the other advantages is that because this is a product we all really believe in, it's kind of easy. And the guys are excited, right, to build it out and to support it and to provide the best experience to our users or servers, at least, that we can. But yeah, building it for us, I think is hugely a strategic advantage. We can take it to any jurisdiction. We can accommodate for compliance and regulatory and whatever stuff, because the regulatory and compliance stuff in Pakistan is totally different than our SA landscape. From fee structure and a commission structure or whatever else in the app even, that's different. But now, because we build it ourselves, we can accommodate these two models, or multiple models.
So I did actually think about another question from a product perspective, but now I'm picturing the majority of the user base. I'm thinking that the nature of your technology needs to be quite data light, not just in terms of the actual size of the app itself, but also with the information that's flowing like to and beyond it. You also spoke to about the fact that it's like you're able to collect this information from your database, from your servers, and then distribute it into the app as well. So it's clearly not housed there. But like, there's obviously like data costs in terms of moving this across. Like, is the solution also data free? How did you manage that? Because it's like, it's kind of like, does it all like sit and land? It's not going to sit and land in the app, but then it's also got to sit in the servers. But now you're in multiple countries with multiple different servers. It's like there's like just a lot going on.
Yeah, I can just touch on the data free portion that we've built in. It's been data free probably for about 3.5 years now. And it's basically just reverse billing whatever usage you have on the app. But I can say to you, obviously we've grown from 80 users to 500,000 users on the platform. And what that actually means is that our data usage has grown to cost us about almost 180,000 a month for our data usage, because it's quite a lot. But since 6 months ago, we actually turned off our legacy app, which was written in a language, a framework, and we've swapped over to Flutter, which is one of the newbies in the frameworks that Google is providing. And our data cost was cut with about 50,000-60,000 Rand a month, just because of that lighter framework and the way that it caches some of the data and the images on the app itself. So that was incredible. It was incredible to see.
Okay, I'm super stoked the fact that, again, I know nothing about tech, but I was able to get one like nuggets that someone here can go and be like, okay, cool, Flutter's going to save me like a third of my data costs. Yes, awesome, go me. Guys, this has been an awesome conversation. It's been amazing chatting to all of you at once. I love the amount of passion that you have, not just for your business, but also what you're going to be doing in the world with what you're bringing to the fore. And it's again, it reinforces why I love doing this, and it's really been truly inspirational. So you spoke a little bit earlier just around your views in terms of how your product's going to change in the next coming months. But I guess just talk to me, what does the next 6 to 12 months look like for you guys and for paymenow?
Yeah, so the next 12 months definitely is make a big success in Pakistan, continue being the success that we are in SA in the existing markets. So I think we quite ambitiously over the last 4 years went into 5 new, well, like Brian said earlier, 7 jurisdictions. We cut 2, so we were very happy to fail fast there and take our learnings from that. We got to make these existing jurisdictions a big success. I think we've built a product now where the initial ability to get access to cash, now with the vouchers at no fees, we've added a savings product. We've got the gamified financial education. I think we built this very well-rounded product within SA. And how do we then take that and deploy it to all the existing jurisdictions that we're at? So in Pakistan, for example, you can only cash out and you get the education modules. We need to add the other products there to make this thing, turn it into that flagship that we have in SA. We also constantly adding new features onto the employer side. So that's a next focus for us in the next 12 months. And then it is really, how do we go from servicing 500,000 people in SA to 1 million? We've set ourselves some further ambitious targets to say, we want to be on 1 million employees in the SA market. And I think the only way to do that is to start breaking into the public sector. And that takes time. We've had to jump through a few hoops there. Definitely doable, but it's also something that we probably approach with a bit of caution, seeing some of the experiences that we had in Lesotho that I mentioned earlier. So we want to reach further scale. Further scale means better terms with our upstream vendors and funders, which inevitably then means better fees at the end of the day for the consumer. So the bigger we get, the cheaper it becomes, closer to zero in terms of fees. That's where we want to get to. And then just make all our jurisdictions the success that we've seen in SA.
So guys, just to finish off, and the way I do every single podcast is, what's the one question that I haven't asked you, that I should have asked you, that you'd like to answer now?
So, I mean, I'll tell you what I've. So if you look at the Pay Me Now if you look at us on LinkedIn, you'll notice that we don't have a COO. Okay, so and I think it sort of ties into the conversation that I had earlier with you, Cam, where I said when you're starting a new business, everyone's thinking strategy. Everyone's thinking around the business. How are we going to build this thing? What's going to differentiate us? What are our unique selling points? And then you start the business, and then you start signing up clients, and you start getting caught up in this operational quagmire of running what you've now initially envisaged, and when you were so super sharp on the strategy. And as you sort of go on this journey, you quickly get caught up with the run of the business. So I just think that from a business perspective, it's so super important that you empower, you hire incredible people, that you can empower them, that they can run with the business, so that the leadership that was inevitably the team that built this awesome product can free themselves up. And I think it very much ties into what you guys do as a business, is how do you actually empower the founders again to continuously come up with new ideas? How do we go to the different jurisdictions? How do we make this thing the success and that quick ramp up that we saw in the early phase? So we don't have a COO. I think I've been wearing, together with Willem and Harry, a joint COO hat for the last couple of years. And that's just because it was our baby, and it is our baby. So we want to be involved in every single little bit of the business. We're involved in every single hire within Pay Me Now. Is that sustainable? We'd love to try. But I think it does get to a point where you do need to, I don't want to say let go, but you need to focus your most valuable resources at the bits that's most valuable to the business. And it's not necessarily always within the run component. So how do we do the next level of taking a step out, at a bird's eye view, having a look at the landscape, and how do we constantly keep Pay Me Now at the forefront and being the market leader that we are? So not saying it's a question that you didn't ask, but I'll just maybe it's a challenge that we currently grappling with. It's we grew super fast. We've got an incredible business. We've got an incredible product. People do copy us. And all the guys that are copying us are looking at us to see what's the next thing they need to copy. So we got to be really good at what we put out into the market.
Yeah, I maybe want to add to that, because I don't have a question necessarily that you didn't ask. But while we were talking about hiring as well, and scaling this thing up, at some stage, one of us. So you can hire a bunch of people when you're a startup, and you got funding to do that. But you won't necessarily know what they should do, right? So you can hire someone to do that job, but you don't know what the job entails yourself. When we started, one of all the four of us basically ran the entire business and did everything from support to sales to building the tech to whatever. And I think that's been key in our growth as well. When we hired people, we actually did the job. It was someone in the teams and now in the bigger team's job. So they know what it entails. So if we hire someone, we know exactly what they should be doing. And that also gives us the ability to not necessarily hire someone with the perfect skill set, but the attitude is right. And we can tell them, okay, this is what I want. This is what I want you to do. And basically grow the business that way. I think it's got a huge impact in our culture as well. Because everybody there is a doer, right? There's nobody that just gives instruction. I think that, yeah, it's not necessarily a question and you didn't ask, but I think that's had a huge impact.
So guys, thank you so much for being on the podcast. It's been an absolute privilege and joy to have you on the Founder Files. Like I said, your passion really, really shines through, and it's absolutely amazing to share this journey with you. And I can't wait to see how you continue to grow and scale. So all the best for 2025 and beyond. And thank you once again for being here.
Thanks, Cam. All the best, mate.
As was abundantly clear in the story that these gentlemen have just shared with us, scaling a business is a complex activity because of all the different growth strategies and ideas that you have in front of you. The approaches towards geographic expansion and how do we go into these different countries? Do we take a partnership model? How do we scale that? How do we improve our own product suites? How do we make sure we're having features that are beneficial to our users, but then also adding features that are beneficial to our customers? How does our identity shift and shape as we learn and as our business continues to grow and develop? There are all of these variables that one needs to consider when scaling a business, and this is exactly what we help entrepreneurs do. And in these approaches to growth strategy, whether it's organic growth, horizontal integration, geographic expansion, etc., right? We help unpack this to help you make sense of what are the best approaches for you now. Because we all hear it all the time, how we often pay these school fees and have these lessons. And my favorite line of all time is always, it's like, oh, we didn't think it would be that difficult. By having us on board and having us help guide you through this thinking process, you can make sure that you're making the right decisions at the right time for where your business is at, and really be able to scale with clarity, confidence, and peace of mind that you're making the right calls and getting the right lessons that you're in advance of. If you want to find out how we do this, well, then the first step is just to reach out to me. Have a curiosity call. Let's meet each other. Find out a bit about your business. If this is something that you actually need and would want, and what it would be like to potentially work with us and what the journey's like. And if you would like to reach out to me and have that call, please follow the description in this podcast below. Click on the link that goes to MetaEvolve's website, and you'll be able to book a 30-minute curiosity call with me with no strings attached. Really looking forward to meeting you. And thanks again to everyone for listening to another full episode of the Founder Files. I will see you next time. Cheers for now. I'm going to do that last part again because I started. And thank you once again, everyone, for listening to another full episode of the Founder Files. I really appreciate that you are and thank you everyone for following. And thank you everyone for now listening to another full episode of the Founder Files. It honestly means the world to me to know that I have your support and that you find so much value from this podcast. So thank you once again. I will see you next time. Same place, different time. That's nonsense. I'm going to do this again. And thank you once again for listening to another full episode of the Founder Files. Your support and your following means the absolute world. It's a huge motivation as to why I do this. I'm glad that you find so much value from this podcast. So if you do, remember to share it with all of your friends and entrepreneurs and anyone that you know that might get the same level of value, because I would love it if as many people as possible can avoid so much trial and error in trying to scale their own business using the lessons from founders like the guys from paymenow. But that's it from me for now. Thank you again for tuning into the Founder Files. I will see you next time. Cheers for now.